Hello there and welcome to Graphic Reviews, where I will be reviewing the latest flicks from indie to mainstream and everything in between. So I'm here to tell you this week about why Ghost in the Shell is amazing and everyone should get off their butts, should leave their houses, go to the cinema and watch this amazing film. Don't pay attention to the reviews, they're all baloney. Pre-warning, this is going to be full of spoilers, so if you don't want to know what happens in this film, you don't know anything about Ghost in the Shell, well, maybe you shouldn't be naysaying anyway, but stop watching now because I'm going to spoiler the heck out of this film, okay? You've been warned. Ghost in the Shell, I need to start off by saying, is one of the most visually amazing films I have ever seen in my life. It blends CGI with live action in such a way I've never seen before in my life. It takes the frames from the original film and just puts you into a sort of Philip K. Dick futuristic dystopian world which is just so rich and textured and it's so believable, which I find really difficult with films sometimes because the CGI is so rubbish I don't believe the world I'm in. A lot of people have been saying that this film reminds them quite a lot of RoboCop and that the ideas that are talked about aren't actually that new. Well, is anything new really these days? Yes, there are elements of this film where it's a bit like RoboCop. We have a woman trapped in a robotic body effectively and she's trying to deal with whether she's human or whether she's just a robot. This film is hugely important to the modern age because it is dealing with concepts of people being taken over by major corporations, effectively being brainwashed into thinking a certain way when actually they're not that person at all. That's happening now, so although this film is fictional, there's a lot of similarities we can draw from. In terms of comparing this film to the original anime, they actually did a really good job. It's quite difficult to compare two completely different forms. One is for a film at the time, in 1995, that anime was the cutting edge of CGI technology. That film company were doing things that have never been done in animation before. Again, this film is doing things that has never really been done in animation before. Yes, it lifts from the original anime and recreates scenes which I think actually look amazing, particularly with the scene where the major tracks down the chap in the big lake in the middle of the town. That is sublime. The recreation of the major falling from the tower, just stunning, and everything that they've added in between. It's such a nice, wonderful mixture of real life, of real props with CGI. The acting performances, I can't really fault any of them. From having Beat Takeshi, who doesn't speak a word of English in the whole film, he is fantastic, and to be honest, it was amazing to have such an established Japanese actor in something which has been so controversially slated as being such an anti-Japanese film in the first place. The Japanese character was the solid good force driving the entire movie, and I think that's being really overlooked. Scarlett Johansson, for someone who's 5'2", did a really good job of trying to be the major. Her mannerisms, you could tell she really thought about how this character would walk, how this character would talk, and it wasn't just monotonous, but yet it still had not a lot of inflection that you could tell she wasn't quite fully a human. And all the supporting cast as well, like, again, I can't fault anyone's acting performances. I would probably say some of the script at points was a bit slow, but at the same time, there's a lot to take in. I think a lot of people have criticised this film as having quite a bad script, but I think there's just a lot to think about whilst you're watching it, and you can get distracted with the amazing images with the script because it's so beautifully made. It's something that's designed to be watched more than once. This film was so diverse, not just in cast and visuals, but also in everyone who worked so hard. Chinese film companies, New Zealand film companies, strong female lead. I mean, if we keep dissing Scarlett Johansson being in this role, then how are we ever going to get a Black Widow film made? As you know, in the original anime, it's in a raceless society. It's predominantly Japanese people in robotic bodies, but it's set in Hong Kong. Although it felt global, it felt a bit like Blade Runner, it was a bit RoboCop, it was still rich in Japanese origin and history. And visually, I mean, the geisha robot was just a complete and utter just treat for me. They had the whole tea setting and then the geisha, so to have that and then twisting that around, like, it's almost like the more the Japanese culture was being roboticized, the more it was turning back and rebelling against that. So I thought that was really clever and again visually really stunning. The holograms across all the buildings, you've got Tokyo themes and visuals and just making them bigger. Spoiler alert, the Major's childhood bedroom had lovely Girls' Day dolls. It's just such a shame that everyone could see past how Japanese this film was. As some of you may know, with manga, the original illustrations were hugely based on Disney's illustrations, so that's why quite a lot of manga characters have got the wide-eye look. And a lot of Japanese people don't actually see the characters as Japanese. Spoiler alert, but I think it's a really important message about the film, is if anybody is angry about Asian characters being westernized, and then this film actually is a big FU to that. This film has a twist in it which makes a comment about, yes, it is really awful. Lots of the lead actresses in Memoirs of a Geisha, which is set in Japan, were actually Chinese. You look at Gods and Kings with Christian Bale, you've got a film set in Egypt and you have an Italian, a British man and loads of Americans playing Egyptians. That's not right. And this happens across the board. I'd love to hear American cinema audiences' opinion on this, but American audiences seem to lump the whole of Europe together, so that gives license for films like Les Miserables and most recently Beauty and the Beast to be set in other European countries but have very British accents. I mean, in Les Miserables they have this Cockney accent going "Vive la France," and the same with Beauty and the Beast. It's bonjour, bonjour. It makes no sense. It's a problem because as long as people want to make millions and millions and millions of pounds and spend millions and millions and millions of pounds in making the film, then this is going to go on, and we're going to see the same actresses being cast and actors being cast in films because they know they will make money off the back of that person being in that film. Can't pick and choose what films we exert our anger onto because it's happening all over, and some films get the brunt of it more than others. Ghost in the Shell is a film that is funded by Asian film companies. It's hitting them the hardest. I think there needs to be a line drawn between fiction and reality. If we compare Ghost in the Shell with La La Land, for example, Ghost in the Shell is drawn from fictitious material. La La Land, although is a musical, it is a fictitious account of what it's actually like to try and make it as an actress in Hollywood. How many casting couch scenes with Emma Stone were there in that film? And how far are we gonna take, like, who can play what? Are we gonna make it so that someone who's born in New York can't play a Texan? That's what acting is. We wouldn't have Scarface if it were not for the fact that even though Al Pacino obviously isn't Cuban, he put his soul into trying to portray a Cuban man. There's both sides to the argument, but I just think it's a real shame that this film has had such a dent on its box office takings and its cinema-going audience, because from the start, before anyone had even seen this film, it was getting tarnished. The narrative surrounding this film online and in the media was don't go and see this film, whereas with something like Suicide Squad the narrative was go and see this film, it's so bad. Same with Fantastic Four, it was don't go and see this film, and everyone followed. I think people need to make their own decisions and go and see a film because they're interested in it, not because of what everyone online tells them to see, or what the media tells them to see, or what the critics say. Just because something's got a 40-something% on Rotten Tomatoes doesn't necessarily mean that film's bad. It just means some people who get paid to review films for a living don't think it's that great. A Cure for Wellness this year is one of the most brilliant, surreal horror films of the last 5 years, but yet no one went to see it because the critics said the plot was a bit convoluted and a bit difficult to understand, whereas actually It was surrealism. You were meant to think about it. It wasn't supposed to be straightforward. Because of this narrative, it means that people have already made the decision that they're not going to see a film, even though they don't know what it's going to be like, which inevitably is going to stop people from going to the cinema because they want to follow the trend, they want to follow the herd. Everyone in this day and age wants to be part of the conversation. How can you be part of the conversation if you don't know what the conversation is about in the first place? Very few people can have a valid opinion on something that they've never experienced. Go and experience Ghost in the Shell. Go and see it in its 3D glory. Sit back and relax with it because you will be blown away. Thank you very much. This has been Graphic Reviews. Please comment and subscribe.